The rain started lightly, almost timidly, when I parked the car in front of my daughter's house. I kept my hands on the steering wheel for a few seconds, with the drops running down the windshield. It was Friday. Dinner was scheduled for 8 o'clock, but I had arrived 15 minutes early. 15 minutes that in the end would change everything. Old photo of us, from when she still wore braids and believed the world was. Car. I took a few steps to the gate and rang the doorbell. The sound echoed muffled inside the house. It took a while. Inside, I saw figures passing by, shadows distorted by the curtain. When the gate finally opened, a woman appeared. The same one who had worked for my daughter for years. But now his gaze was different. Suspicious, tough. "Good evening." "And who are you?" she asked, even though she knew who I was. Feeling my stomach churn. She invited me to dinner. Her face hardened even more. For a moment, I thought it was a mistake, that my daughter hadn't said anything. But then she stepped forward and raised her hand, blocking the entrance. "You can't come in," he said firmly. "It's better to wait a little while." I didn't understand. "What do you mean? She's waiting for me." "Wait in the car, please," he insisted, his gaze avoiding mine. Something was wrong. Something in her tone of voice made me freeze. The kind of thing that is said not out of authority. I looked around confused. Is something happening? She hesitated for a second, then just shook her head nervously. "Please, go to the car, now." There was an urgent need there. It was a fear that I didn't understand. I slowly walked back to the car, still holding the picture frame in my hands. The lights in the room were on. From where I was, I could see part of the side window. That's when I saw it. My daughter was inside. But she was not alone. A man, tall, with a tense posture, was gesturing in front of her. I could feel the weight of that conversation. She was crying. He spoke quickly, aggressively, as if trying to justify himself. My heart raced. For a moment, I thought it was Ricardo, the ex-husband. But no, that face was different. Younger. And yet, there was something familiar in it. The maid reappeared on the balcony and seeing me looking. Then I understood. She wasn't preventing me from entering out of cruelty. I was trying to save. The next instant, I saw Livia push the man, pointing to the door, shouting something I couldn't hear, and slammed the door shut as he left. The picture frame slipped from my hands and fell onto the... I stood there, motionless, watching the scene without sound. And at that moment, I realized that, no matter how much I had prepared myself to ask for forgiveness, there were still secrets I didn't know. The maid ran to the gate and motioned for me to wait. My body was trembling. I didn't know whether I should leave, go in, or simply run away. She opened the gate slowly, her breath ragged. But, "Please, take it easy." I took a few steps, still dizzy. And when I reached the balcony, I saw my daughter on her knees on the floor, crying. That image, it destroyed me. More than all the accusations, more than the prison. Because there, in front of me, was no longer a woman trying to be strong. She was simply... And it was there, even before entering, that I understood. It was my own. The balcony seemed smaller than I remembered. Perhaps it was the weight of the silence that was shrinking her. The sound of the rain hitting the roof tiles mingled with... Kneeling on the living room floor. For a moment I stood there, unable to move, as if crossing that threshold would be to profane something. "Livia," my voice came out trembling, almost a whisper. His eyes were swollen and red. There was a mixture of astonishment and exhaustion in them. "Just tiredness." "What are you doing here?" she asked, not aggressively, just confused. "But it seems..." "I arrived at the wrong time." She looked away, wiping her face with the back of her hand. "I just didn't know that what's right could hurt so much." The air inside the house was heavy, filled with tension and the scent of wilted flowers. A vase that had fallen to the floor left petals scattered. That man? Who was he? I asked, unable to hide my concern. She took a deep breath, looking at the floor before answering. "One of those mistakes we make thinking we're healing a wound, when in reality, we're just opening another one." I sat in the armchair next to him, feeling the coldness of the fabric against my hands. Only the clock marked the time, relentlessly reminding us that we still existed there. "The maid prevented me from entering," I murmured. Livia let out a short, humorless laugh. She tried to protect me. From me? From myself. Her words echoed through the room, and suddenly everything I wanted to say, all the regrets, seemed small in the face of that confession. Asking for silence. "I know you want to talk about forgiveness. But Mother, before forgiveness comes the truth. And the truth is, I still don't know who I am after all this." I felt the ground open up beneath my feet. Because no matter how much I had rehearsed that meeting, no hate, no accusation, empty. "You're still my daughter," she said finally. "And I'm still your mother. The rest we can rebuild, even if it takes a lifetime. The kind that only exists in those who have suffered too." "A whole lifetime is too long, Mom. But maybe that's what we need." We fell silent again. The rain intensified outside, turning the window into a veil of water. The house, which had previously resembled a battlefield, but shelter nonetheless. That's when I noticed something on the dining table. 2 dishes set, 2 glasses of wine, and a lit candle about to go out. I was really expecting it. The dinner took place. The invitation was real. There was also an attempt to fix it. I got up and went to the kitchen. I took the napkin, lit it with the candle, and let the flame rekindle for a moment. "Let's eat," he said with a discreet smile. "If we're going to start over, let's do it with something simple." Livia hesitated, then stood up and came to the table. The silence was different now, not one of rejection. Mom? That man was a journalist, she said suddenly. About what happened to us. But I couldn't handle it. I closed my eyes for a moment. The exposure, the public judgment, the fear of reliving it all. It was understandable. Daughter, I replied. The book was meant to liberate, not to revive. And at that moment, I realized that the dinner wasn't just about reconciliation. Even with scars that would never completely disappear. The taste was bitter, but for the first time in a long time. In the days that followed that dinner, something changed, not in a grand way, but subtly. Livia would send me short messages in the morning, asking if I had slept well. I answered with the same caution as someone stepping on a... There was still fear among us, but also a silent desire to stay. One afternoon, she called me. Could you come by tomorrow? I want to show you something. Her voice sounded lighter, but there was a hint of hesitation. Of course, daughter. What time? After 4 o'clock. I spent the following morning reliving memories, Livia's. The afternoons playing piano with her father. Memories that once hurt now just hurt less. When I arrived at her house, I was greeted by the same maid, Joanna. This time, there were no obstacles. She simply opened the gate and said in an apologetic tone, I did what I thought was right. I lightly touched her hand. You did what you believed was necessary. And deep down, maybe you saved us from something worse. Livia was in the garden, watering some plants. And a warm breeze swayed the leaves of the ipe tree. It's beautiful here, I commented. It feels like a different place. She smiled. I've been trying to take care of something that's growing, even if slowly. We sat on a wooden bench in the shade. She showed me a folder on her lap. I'm helping a group from the foundation with a new project, she said, opening the papers. We want to offer free legal advice to seniors who have been... I looked at her with restrained pride. The idea was good, necessary, and in a way symbolic. Had taken from it one day. That's a great start, I commented. But you know you'll have to deal with criticism. Some people still don't understand your presence at the... She sighed. I know. But I don't want to run away anymore. If I hide, I'll never forgive myself. Silence fell between us. It was a different kind of silence than before. No longer one of hostility, but of reflection. There in that garden, I realized how much my daughter was changing and how much I... Mom, can I ask you something? She kept her eyes fixed on the floor. Sure. You really forgave me? Really? The question came like an arrow. I took a deep breath before answering. Forgiving wasn't a choice. It was survival. If I hadn't forgiven you, I would have died inside. I don't know if I deserve this. Nobody deserves forgiveness, daughter. We accept it. We learn from it. The wind blew stronger, causing some of the ipe tree flowers to fall on us. It seemed like a silent blessing, a reminder that even... Livia closed the folder and remained quiet. "I received a message yesterday," he said finally. My heart sank. From who? From Ricardo. His name, even after so much time, still had the power to turn the air to stone. He said he wants to talk. That he's in a rehabilitation group, trying to make amends for past mistakes. "And what are you going to do?" She gave a sad half-smile. "I don't know." Part of me wants to listen. Part of me wants to forget he exists. I looked at my daughter's face. It was the face of a woman torn between guilt and hope. I knew that decision could reignite old ghosts, but it could. Sometimes conversation isn't about the other person. It might be what's needed to close what never ended. "Maybe, but I'm not ready yet," I replied. "Whenever you are ready, I'll be here." The smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the kitchen. Putting sugar only in mine, a reminder of an old habit. Smile. "And I still remember you always saying that coffee was bitter but necessary." We laughed. And in that laughter there was more healing than in any therapy. That night I barely got any sleep. Livia's words echoed in my head like a persistent refrain. Ricardo. The name sounded like muffled thunder, distant. For years I had tried to erase him from our lives, trying to return to the story that almost destroyed my... The next morning, I went to my bedroom window and watched the sunrise. Touching the curtains like careful fingers. For a moment I felt a strange peace. Then the fear returned. I picked up the phone. "Livia, good morning." "Hi, Mom. Have you thought about what you're going to do?" She took a while to reply. "I've been thinking about it all night. I think I'll find him." My heart tightened, but I tried to keep my voice steady. "Right here, in the house." "Do you want me to go too?" "No, I want to do this alone." There was maturity in her voice. And even against all my maternal instincts, I knew I needed to respect that. I spent the day restless, looking at the clock every half hour. As the sun began to set, the phone vibrated with a short message. He arrived. I kept imagining the scene, the same door, the same garden. But now it was my daughter who opened and closed that door. Seeing her embrace her own past. Later that night, she called me. Her voice was trembling. "Mom, I saw Ricardo." "And how did it go?" There was a long pause. "He looks different. Thin, tired. He said he's been clean for 8 months. That he wants to ask for forgiveness?" I sat on the bed trying to process it. "And you?" I heard it. I only heard it. That was brave. She took a deep breath. "Mom?" I thought I was going to feel anger. But what I felt was pity. That confession really affected me. Pity. Perhaps this was the first sign of healing, when hatred, even if still mixed with pain. He asked to see me again, she said. And what did you answer? Something I need to think about. There was silence from both sides. I wanted to advise her, protect her, tell her it wasn't worth it. But a part of me knew that some wounds only heal when you... In the following days, I noticed a subtle change in Livia. More vulnerable at others. He started writing again. Short texts, fragments of thoughts, small reflections that he sent to the foundation. One afternoon, she showed me one of them. Perhaps forgiveness is not about erasing the past. Where there was once pain, compassion can now be born. I read those words and realized my daughter was finally... What happened? But learning to give it new meaning. On Friday, Mom, here at home. She smiled, remembering the message that one day changed everything. Mom, shall we have dinner on Friday? Just the two of us. More complete. That Friday, I arrived at her house at dusk. The gate was ajar. The garden light was on, casting a yellowish glow on the flowers. I rang the doorbell, and Joanna appeared with a shy smile. I went in. The smell of home-cooked food wafted through the house. I hope you like it, she said. I learned the recipe from you. I sat at the table and watched her. It was amazing how much she had transformed in just a few. There was still pain, of course, but there was also purpose. The conversation revolved around the foundation, new projects. But in the end, she looked at me with a hesitant expression. I swallowed hard. How can I help? He wants to join the foundation group. He wants to tell his own story. I remained silent. The air seemed heavy. I don't know, daughter. That decision needs to be yours. But whatever it is, I'll be by your side. She nodded slowly. I know, and that's why I can think calmly. But which somehow belonged to us again. And when I said goodbye, I realized something I hadn't felt in a long time. We were truly rising from the ashes. A few days after dinner, I received an unexpected call. Our coordinator at the Aurora Foundation, the project that... People. Helena, did you see Livia's email? She asked, her voice animated. Not yet. What happened? She sent a proposal for a talk at the next recovery. But there's a catch. Her pause was revealing. She wants to bring Ricardo. For a moment, the silence between us weighed like a wall. I repeated slowly, as if I needed to test the word in my mouth before believing. Yes. He said he wants to tell his own side of the story. Manipulation, the guilt, and the wrong choices. The sound of the clock on the wall seemed too loud. Finally, I took a deep breath. If she thinks this can help, then let it happen. I trusted my daughter. I trusted the process that had brought... Past could reopen wounds that seemed to have already healed. I arrived early at the auditorium. The chairs were arranged in a semicircle, and the smell of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the air. Livia arrived shortly after, wearing a light blue blouse and black pants. Her hair, styled in a simple bun, made her face look more mature, almost serene. She took a deep breath. I don't even know what I'm feeling, Mom. Then Ricardo went inside. For a moment, time seemed to slow down. The man before me was merely a shadow of what I remembered. Carried something I didn't expect to see. Regret. Helena. Ricardo. My voice came out firm, but my chest burned. That wasn't my decision, I replied, looking at Livia. He nodded, understanding the weight of the gesture. Livia spoke first. He spoke of the fall, the public exposure. He spoke of the shame and the courage to start over. The room seemed to hold its breath. I was the mastermind behind the coup, he began bluntly. But what few people understand is that the biggest blow, it was against myself. He spoke of years of greed, the feeling of power, about how the void he tried to fill with money turned into, and about the day she saw her own daughter being taken away. Everything that mattered. When you destroy someone you love, there's no worse punishment than waking up and remembering. I looked at Livia. She kept her gaze fixed on him, without tears, without anger, and just presence. It was as if, for the first time, she was able to see him as a flawed human being, and not as the monster of the past. When the event ended, the audience gave them a standing ovation. Not for the spectacle, but for the courage that lay in that shared vulnerability. Helena, did you realize? He whispered. This is what we call true reconstruction. I nodded, still speechless. Livia and Ricardo talked alone for a few minutes, trying to resist the urge to intervene. I saw when he apologized, and she, in a trembling voice. I still don't know if I can forgive you, but I want to try to understand. That was enough. Sometimes, forgiveness isn't the end of the story. It's just the first. That night, back in my apartment, I sat on the balcony and watched the city lights. Even unintentionally, it pushed us toward more whole versions of ourselves. I received a message from Livia. Thank you for trusting me, Mom. Today I understood what it truly means to be free. She smiled, feeling a tear slowly roll down her cheek. I felt like I could breathe without weight. In the days that followed the lecture, the routine seemed to quietly change. There was an apparent calm, but beneath it I felt a slight tension, like a taut string. Livia came to the foundation every day. Her presence seemed different, firmer, more focused. Lost in thoughts she didn't dare interrupt. One afternoon, while we were reviewing reports, Mom? She began, without looking at me. Do you believe that people really change? I think some do. Others just learn to hide who they really are better. She nodded slowly. Ricardo wrote to me. My heart gave me an involuntary jolt. Did he write it? What does he want? You said you're moving to the countryside to start a social project? Would you like to apologize in person before you leave? I closed my eyes for a moment. And what did you answer? Still nothing. She ran a hand over her face. Part of me wants to end this once and for all. Wants to listen. I looked at her and my daughter. So different and yet so much like me. Remembering what he did to you isn't the same as dwelling on. But it's also not easy to face someone who almost destroyed. She gave a tired half smile. Perhaps forgiveness isn't for him, Mother. Perhaps it's for me. 2 days later, when I arrived at the foundation, Helena, Ricardo is dead. The words hung in the air without making immediate sense. I asked, feeling the ground shake beneath my feet. For a moment, the sound of the surrounding traffic seemed to disappear. Livia arrived a few minutes later. She noticed it from Rose's expression even before I said, "No," he murmured and brought his hand to his mouth. And I felt her body tremble, not from pure sadness. It was as if all the conflicting emotions she had been. I don't know what to feel, she confessed, sobbing. And that makes me feel awful. There's no such thing as a wrong feeling when it comes to. What matters is what you do with what you feel. The burial took place 2 days later, in a small cemetery on the outskirts of the city. The weather was gray, and a cold wind swept across the lawn. She said she needed to close that chapter with her own eyes. I stayed inside the car, watching from a distance. She didn't cry. He just stood there staring intently, like someone observing a symbol, not of loss. When he returned, he seemed lighter. It was strange, she said, closing the car door. Me now fits inside a wooden box. Sometimes that's how the past ends, I replied. That night, while we were making tea, Livia approached me with a serene expression. I want to continue the foundation's work, he said. Aimed at people who have fallen and want to start over. Smile. Former offenders? She nodded. Yes. People who know the weight of guilt, but also the strength of rebuilding. The idea moved me. It was bold but true, born of pain and awareness. Replied. And I know your father would be proud. She looked at me surprised. Can you still talk about him without bitterness? Time does that, daughter. The pain settles. It doesn't disappear, but it stops screaming. Livia smiled, a calm smile, full of gratitude. There was always something about you worth saving. It was a full hug. Without fear, without reservations, without the past interfering between us. And in that instant, I realized that, although the project was called Aurora, the true rebirth, the following months passed like a light breeze, carrying the weight of what was left behind. The Aurora Foundation, the name chosen by Livia, began as, but soon took on a life of its own. It was beautiful to watch that happen. Seeing my daughter, once a prisoner of guilt, women scarred by wrong decisions, and speaking to them not as, "No one is the worst thing they've ever done," she would say. Those words came with a kind of authority that cannot be. They came from experience, from the scar that transforms into a map. I watched everything in silence, often from a corner of the room, and thought about how many times I had almost lost her. Now she was there, guiding others through the same labyrinth in which she almost got lost. One night, after an intense lecture, we were left alone in the auditorium, gathering our materials. Her gaze fixed on the foundation's brochures. "What happened?" I asked, approaching her. She took a while to reply. "I was thinking about everything we've been through." He paused, "and how this could help other people." "Not like that. I want to write about it." I looked at her, surprised. "To write?" "Yes." "A book." Not a self-help book, nor a book of regrets, but a book of truth. Our truth. The idea kept echoing in my head. The weight of memories, the fear of exposing old wounds. But it's also a chance to transform what was once shameful. "If we're going to tell the story, I want to tell it together," he said finally. Livia looked at me with teary eyes, as if she hadn't expected to hear that. "Would you do that to me?" "I would do it. For you. For us." The following weeks were consumed by note-taking, interviews. Each chapter felt like a wound being carefully opened, There were days when Livia cried so much that I had to. There were others where I myself needed to leave the room too. But little by little, the words began to heal us. On paper, the story ceased to be just about suffering. We recall moments that had already faded from memory. The smell of coffee on Sunday mornings when we were still. While looking through old photos, we found one that made us stop and think. Livia was 16 years old, sitting next to her father, laughing. There was such pure joy in that image that it took my breath. "I remember that day," she said with a sad smile. "And you stopped right after he left." "It was too painful," he replied, his eyes moist. I then realized how we had dealt with pain in opposite ways. The objects, she had fled from everything that reminded her. Both trying to survive the same void, but in opposite directions. When the manuscript was almost finished, we received an unexpected call. It was from a renowned publisher interested in publishing our story. The title he suggested was simple, but spot on. "We accept." Not out of vanity, but out of a sense of purpose that was no longer just ours. When the auditorium lights came on and I saw people lining, Livia held my hands. "Thank you," she whispered, "for never giving up on me. There was always something about you worth saving, daughter." She hugged me, and for the first time in a long time. It was simply love. An imperfect, patched up, but true love. I realized we were no longer characters in a tragedy. We were the authors of our own redemption. The launch of Among the Ashes, it was more than just an event. Those who made mistakes, those who suffered, those who decided to start over. Livia went up on stage first. His speech was simple, but each word seemed to spring from a true place. He spoke about guilt, about forgiveness, about the silent courage of those who choose to live with. I watched her from the corner, feeling a pride that mixed tenderness and admiration. Was the same one who had once looked at me with desperate eyes, unsure if she deserved to live. When it was my turn to speak, the room was silent. Came. No love is immune to everything. Ours was broken, torn, burned, but it was also rebuilt. And perhaps that's what truly makes it strong. The people rose to their feet in applause. Not for me nor for her, but for what each of us recognized within ourselves. Rebuilt. The following months were intense. The book spread through social media, was cited in programs. We received letters from people who said they had found, or simply try again. But what moved me the most were the visits to the Aurora. There, between simple walls filled with colorful posters, women with pasts marred by mistakes were reunited with their men who had lost everything started over by sweeping the high. One day, while observing one of these rehabilitation sessions, with shy eyes and a trembling voice, approached me. Absent. She pressed the book against her chest. I read everything. I thought my mother would never forgive me. But after reading your story, I had the courage to look for her. I couldn't answer. I just held her hand. At that moment, I understood that the true miracle was not that we had, but seeing other people finding their way through our pain. On a rainy afternoon, while we were reviewing foundation documents, Livia received an unexpected email. It belonged to a former lawyer from Felipe Montero's many years ago. The content was brief, but it carried the weight of the past. New victims have been identified. Justice has been served. Livia read silently, her eyes fixed on the screen. I don't feel anything. Nothing, I asked, surprised. Neither relief nor anger, just peace. Listening to the sound of the rain against the windows. Felipe Ricardo. All the ghosts of the past seemed to dissolve on that gray. A few weeks later, Livia invited me to dinner at her house. The maid who once prevented me from entering now greeted me. The walls, once cold and silent, were decorated with photos, not of luxuries. Spontaneous hugs. During dinner, she told me about her new project, a mentorship program for... I want to give them the same kind of chance I had. Not everyone has someone who believes in them. I looked at her, feeling my heart lighten. "You've become the woman I always dreamed you'd be." She smiled. "I wouldn't have been able to do it without you." We toasted with grape juice, laughing at the symbolism it held. Nothing excessive, just a genuine moment between mother and daughter who had. That night, when I got home, I stopped the car in front of her window. The lights were on, and I could see her through the glass, laughing, alive, whole. And I thought, if someone had told me at that moment that I would still see. But there she was. Redeemed, transformed. And I, finally at peace. I closed my eyes and gave thanks. To life, to pain, to time, and to the grace of starting over. Sometimes I found myself observing time from afar, without trying to stop the current. Livia became a well-known figure. Their social projects started small, but soon caught the attention of larger organizations. She spoke at conferences, gave interviews, and whenever someone praised her, she would say, "I am the result of love that never gave up on me." Humility. There was a time when the name Livia Duarte was synonymous. Today, it was synonymous with hope. One afternoon, during an event at a public school, a girl approached her with a notebook in her hands. "I wrote a text about you," she said shyly. Us. Livia knelt down to be at her level and read in silence. Then he told me what was written. Not every mistake is the end. Sometimes it's the beginning of a new version of ourselves. Perhaps that was the purest and truest summary of everything. Over time, our lives settled into a calmer rhythm. While I dedicated myself to giving talks on forgiveness, and sometimes we would go up on stage together, mother and side by side, and I realized how our stories no longer. There were scars that are no longer wounds. Every now and then, the shadow of the past would still appear. An old photograph. At first it hurt. Now we've learned how to cope. One night she called me late. "Mom, do you still think about everything that happened?" Me neither. I think I've learned to be grateful even for the pain. Grateful even for the pain. How many people in the world can say that without their voices trembling? When she turned 40, Livia wanted to have a different kind of celebration. He decided to plant 100 trees on the land next to. Each tree will represent a story of new beginnings. We spent the whole day together, sweating, laughing, with our hands covered in dirt. It was symbolic. New roots are growing in the soil that once held ruins. She rested her head on my shoulder and murmured, "I think we're finally at peace." "I think so," I replied, smiling. "Peace isn't what comes after the storm. It's what's born inside us, even when the ground is still wet." Inside, just a sheet of paper with a few words. "But seeing what you have built makes me believe that good." The letter was Ricardo's. My heart raced. I showed it to Livia, who read it silently and simply said, No resentment, no anger. Only the awareness that the past was, in fact, closed. I understand that life never took anything from me I lost my confidence, my peace of mind, my footing. Pain tears us apart, yes. But sometimes, it is in this fragmentation that we find space to be reborn. 5 languages. I sat by the window with a cup of tea in my. Outside, the wind blew gently, and the trees we had planted with so much effort were already tall. I closed my eyes and gave thanks, as I did every morning. But because we have learned to look at it with love, the pain hasn't disappeared, it has transformed. The auditorium was packed. The chairs lined up to the back of the hall, and a soft light illuminated the stage where, in a few minutes, the name of the event was simple: New Beginnings. While we waited backstage, I heard the muffled sounds of the audience, suppressed. The anxious murmur of those who had come to hear something. Livia was adjusting the pages of her speech, but I knew she wouldn't need them. In recent months, everything we had experienced had been transformed into. She turned to me, a serene glint in her eyes. "Mom, are you nervous?" Smile. "No, just grateful." She chuckled softly. "Grateful even for the pain, remember?" Absent. Yes, I remembered. When they called our names, we walked to the stage together. But the silence that followed was even more powerful. Livia looked at me, took a deep breath, and began. "I thought one mistake was enough to erase everything I was." The audience was attentive, each face reflecting empathy. "Is that guilt only destroys us if we let it. That forgiveness isn't an easy shortcut. It's a long road." He paused for a moment. "And I was only able to walk this path because someone." She turned her face towards me. Her eyes met mine, and I saw there the same girl from before. Everything and survived. When it was my turn to speak, the words came out naturally. "I'm not a hero. I'm just a mother who made mistakes, who was afraid, but who chose to stay." I swallowed hard, feeling my voice falter. Staying isn't easy. Loving someone who hurt you isn't easy either. But when we choose love despite the pain, something changes inside us. Something is reborn. There was silence. One of those silences filled with truth, where no one moves. It was as if everyone there was, in some way. What happened to me and my daughter could happen to anyone, I continued. No one is immune to falling, but we are all invited to start over. When we finished, the audience stood up. The sound of applause echoed off the walls, and I felt a lump in my throat. Livia held my hand and we hugged, a complete hug. It was not a gesture to erase the past, but to honor it. And it was from him that we built everything that came after. A few days later, we were the same home where it all began and ended so. The sun streamed through the windows, gilding the air, and the sound of coffee brewing filled the silence with a kind of peace that can only be achieved after a long storm. One follower had written, "After hearing your story, I decided to forgive my father." She looked at me, visibly moved. "That's why it was worth it, Mom." I nodded, feeling the tears welling up. It's always worthwhile when one person's pain becomes. Sometimes I think about everything that has happened since. And I saw a scene from the car that changed everything. But in truth, it was only the beginning of a story that I didn't yet know. Today I understand. Forgiveness is not about forgetting, it's about remembering. It's about looking at what hurt and still choosing to move. No matter how bad the chapter seems, there's still a blank page waiting to be written. Sometimes all that's missing is the courage to turn the page. Leave your comment. And never forget. Even when all seems lost, there's always a way to start. Over